Hello there, friends, and welcome to episode 294 of Just the Zoo of Us. This week, I am joined by Roxy Valdez, who is a digital artist and illustrator who has been working across the medium for almost 20 years. They have worked on big projects like Angry Birds, Fall Guys, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and was even the character design lead for Comedy Central's animated series, Lofi. You may have noticed that this episode is a little extra long. That is because this episode is a bit different from our usual format, but I am so excited about it, and I think you're all going to have a great time along with us, especially the sci-fi nerds out there. In the first half of this episode, we talk about speculative evolution. For those unfamiliar, speculative evolution, which is sometimes called speculative biology and can be abbreviated to spec evo or spec bio, is basically a realm of science fiction that explores what-if scenarios using real-world biology and ecology and evolution. Roxy tells us about the academic research that goes into developing fictional creatures for science fiction or fantasy worlds, and we go into detail about their own Amphiterra Project, which is an exploration of the wildlife populating an imagined Earth dominated by amphibians. They share with us some of the really fascinating scientific concepts that inspired their creations and some insights into the creative process that I think any science fiction artist or writer or even just a curious fan will really enjoy. Then, in the second half of the episode, we get hands-on. Roxy and I teamed up to create our very own fictional creatures using a really, really fun interactive dice rolling experiment that they came up with just for us. They also have made gorgeous illustrations of the creatures that we came up with together that will be shared on our socials. I have seen them. I'm thrilled about them. They're really beautiful. You're going to want to see these. This episode is truly a multimedia experience, and I just couldn't be happier about it. We had possibly the most fun I've ever had on an episode, and I think all you nerds out there are going to love it. Just the Zoo of Us presents Speculative Evolution with Roxy Valdez. Hello, everybody. This is Ellen Weatherford with Just the Zoo of Us, your favorite animal review podcast. I am really excited this week. I think we have a very fun and fascinating conversation ready for today. We have a brand new friend. This is Roxy Valdez. Say hi, Roxy.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Roxy Valdez. I use they, them pronouns.
Thank you so much. I am really excited because I feel like the conversation we're going to have today is really zeroed in on something that I'm very into and very passionate about, that I think a lot of our listeners are very passionate about. And you are coming to us from a creative and an artistic angle in terms of like how you're expressing your love for nature and animals. So Roxy, how did you get into work in speculative evolution? Were you an art kid? Were you an animal kid? Were you like a both kid?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I can't understate how much it was those two things. I was the art kid. I was the animal kid. I grew up in Mexico, and my grandmother had this setup that stole American TV broadcast signals to play them down there back in, the olden times. So I grew up on like Amazing Animals, the National Geographic documentaries and stuff, the Kratt Brothers and Jack Hanna specials and all those. And they were just incredibly informative to me. And I would draw animals all the time. I think I remember being like 6 or 7 or something like that. And for whatever school reason, I had to do a really accurate beluga drawing.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time that I kind of had an inkling that this is probably where I was going to go in life. And since then, yeah, I pursued that as much as I could. I had members of my family who were extremely supportive of that. So I would do things like I got to go to New York a lot of times, and I would constantly go to the American Museum of Natural History to the point where I practically could have given a tour of it. I just love every zoo, aquarium. I always go to any that I can. I had zoo books.
Oh, a banger.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually very jealous. I never did get zoo books. I checked them out from the library, but I did not have my own.
I got them secondhand, so I didn't get the tiger poster, but...
Oh, the tiger. I wanted that poster so bad.
But yeah, I just thought those were the coolest. And especially back then, a lot of the illustrations for things like this would be these incredibly beautiful, wash paintings.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in the realm of anything that's paleo art. That tends to intersect a lot with painting. So I pursued that. You know what? Actually, I would say the start of the speculative evolution avalanche was there was a show called The Future is Wild on Discovery Channel. It would have been 2007, 2008, something like that. And in Mexico, they played it at midnight. So it's something that I needed to have a conversation with my parents to be able to do.
Oh, did they let you stay up to watch it?
They did, but I had to do chores and stuff and make sure I was up the next day for school and everything because it was Monday at midnight.
That's a slay. That's so cool. I think that's cool of your parents to be yes, you got to earn it, but also, yes, we will let you do this thing.
Yeah. And that was a show that was what would evolution be like 5 million years in the future from now, 50 million years in the future from now, 100 million, and then 200 million. So doing a whole gamut.
Wow.
It was based on the work of an artist named Dougal Dixon, who I would say is probably, if not the grandfather of speculative evolution, sort of the main proponent of it. He did a bunch of books that were sort of what-if questions, with just beautiful illustrations and explorations that were not easy to get. So I also spent 10 years slowly collecting his books that are things like, what could humans evolve into over the next hundreds of millions of years? What could the dinosaurs have evolved into if they hadn't gone extinct? As well as he did a lot of straight up paleo media in general. And he's still kicking around. He's been doing it since the 70s. And I still see videos of him at the zoology conventions in the UK.
A titan of industry.
Genuinely. Certainly underappreciated here. But, and I've only really realized this recently, massive in Japan. There's multiple Dougal Dixon animes.
Wow.
And a theme park and gachapon toys.
I feel like this is intersecting with kaiju fandom a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe this is brushing up against the interest in kaiju. I feel like there's an intersection with science fiction kaiju interests there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in Japan, it's a little more common for kids to for example, know what an Anomalocaris is or an Ammonite or things like that. I've seen much younger media aimed at young kids in Japan that involves things like that. There's a whole anime I learned about just recently called Pikaia that is about the first vertebrate.
And that's interesting because there is a lot of Western kids media that is about extinct animals, but it's all the large reptiles, the dinosaurs. It's the T-Rex and the Velociraptor and stuff. But it goes way farther back. Yeah. We're looking at the weird bugs.
Yeah. And as long as we're doing small tangents, you know how there's traveling animatronic dinosaur shows? They'll
Yes.
show up to a zoo or a park.
Love those.
When I was a kid, and I'm talking real young, I'm talking 6 or so. One came to a park near me in Mexico City, Parque Naucali, and they had all the standards and a Dunkleosteus.
Chompy fish. Big chompy fish, right?
Yeah. For whatever reason, I became obsessed with it as a child. I'm trying
That's my boy.
I'm trying to communicate it to my mom. No, I want to go see Donkey, and she's like, we can go see donkeys. It's no, the donkey, the fish. You don't understand. And it just going to it over and over until it left, and that was devastating for me. And still, I'd say Dunkleosteus is my favorite placoderm. But it's obsessions like that. I got to feed a lot of the obsessions and special interests through the course of my education and career.
Oh, that's great. And I feel like a lot of people, maybe kids who are really interested in animals and kids who are really interested in nature and ecology maybe don't realize that there is a path to like pursue a career in that from a creative and from an artistic angle. I feel like not a lot of people consider the option, right? Because they think like, oh, if you're really interested in animals, you would need to, study biology and, get into like field work and things like that. And so I think that it's really helpful for a lot of people to know that like, if you are maybe the kid who likes to sit inside and draw, right? Like maybe that's a good option. And I feel like it's helpful for a lot of people to know that like you can express your passions with a creative angle.
Yeah. It's interesting how things like that would work out because you're right. I was very much like an inside drawing kid.
That's me, baby.
I didn't have very good health as a kid. So I feel like I was encouraged towards inside kid activities. But then it intersects in this way with the natural world and the world outside. And there have been interesting turns. If I hadn't gone into art, I am certain I would have gone into like zoology or something like that. But what stopped me was I didn't feel like I was cut out for field work. And at the time, I thought that would be a much bigger part of it. And B, I didn't know if I would be cut out for academics, for, grants and grant proposals and getting funding and all that, which is then a little funny because my project, the Amphiterra Project, is academic, largely speaking.
Yeah, because you do so much research for not just coming up with the ideas, but also, we've talked to, paleo artists and stuff like that on this podcast in the past. And like, you can't just like kind of willy-nilly like draw what you think this dinosaur or something looked like. Even just in things like how are these muscles connected to the bones? Like it requires so much in-depth research that like you actually are having to do a lot of very rigorous research, even though it, people don't think of, I think, artistic careers as being research heavy. But when you get into these sort of like really science heavy illustrations, you'll be like, I really want to draw this frog, but first I need to read these 7 papers about the evolution of frogs.
You're so right. I've got a pretty good example of what that can entail. When I was doing the Amphiterra Project, which is all about frogs and amphibians, I ran into a roadblock that I did not see coming at all, which is that if you are using Google and trying to find image references of frog skeletal anatomy or even other anatomy of frogs, you're either seeing directly straight down onto it or, like in the case of, say, a dissection, up at its belly. But I could not for the life of me find solid references of a frog skeleton from, say, the side, from the back, etc., etc. So when I did my project, I actually had to petition the school for a certain amount of money to buy a mounted frog skeleton, which I still have, and use that as reference. I think it's still in storage right now. But yeah, just, delicate little thing. Off Amazon? Believe it or not, I got a fully articulated frog skeleton.
Yeah, that's on Prime. Same day shipping, weirdly.
It was.
You think, well, it's a good thing that like the delivery people can't like see what's in your packages, because you'd be like, this is a frog skeleton.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
Now, okay, so we've mentioned the Amphiterra Project, but I don't think we've properly introduced people listening to the Amphiterra Project. Could you introduce us? Tell us about the world of Amphiterra.
So the world of Amphiterra, or the Amphiterra Project, is a exercise in speculative evolution. To clarify something ahead of time, I did the Amphiterra Project as my thesis to get my master's degree in fine arts. And when you're doing that type of thesis, you're generally either proposing a better way to do something or you're trying to answer a question. My proposal, my method was to propose a better way to create bestiaries, to create large amounts of creatures for the purposes of movies, cartoons, games, film.
Like world building,
yes.
Like to flesh out a world. Okay.
A good example of the kind of thing I was responding to was James Cameron's Avatar, where there is some attempt to say, okay, most creatures in this world are blue. Most creatures in this world have 6 limbs as their body plan, but not the main guys, not the main characters that are tall humanoid cat people that don't really share much biologically speaking with anything else around them.
But have boobs, importantly.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if they necessarily give live birth. If they do, they shouldn't. If they do, it shouldn't be in a very humanoid way.
I did feel like when I watched the first Avatar movie, and I watched it in theaters, so I was like fully like a child when this movie came out, but I watched it I guess I would have been 13, and I remember going into it expecting, what I wanted was like a big sweeping documentary, like a nature documentary in space. That was what I fully wanted, and you get that for like 10 minutes, and then they're like, no, we're actually going to do Space Marines Fern Gully. And you're like, well, I wanted the first part. I wanted the first like 15 minutes to be the whole movie.
Yeah, it's like how everyone wishes WALL-E was kind of the first part of it. Continue.
Yeah, give me like 2 hours of just a little dude running around doing cute little dude stuff.
Absolutely. So with things like Avatar being kind of what I was answering to, I wanted to figure out how to make very cohesive sets of characters, creatures. So what I did for Amphiterra, my method is all about the what if questions. So the first part is the what if amphibians had another age of dominance. We already had one age of dominance. What if they had another? Because around 252 million years ago, at the end of the Permian, things dried out significantly in our world. And it just so happened that was very conducive to the creatures that were starting to lay dry, leathery eggs. Next thing you know, we have reptile dominance, and then the age of the dinosaurs, and eventually the age of the mammals. And my question was, well, what if, when things got very dry, what if instead they become even damper and moister and swampier?
Real frog hours.
Exactly. I've always loved the giant amphibians that you see at the Natural History Museum. You know, those like big surfboard-sized salamanders. Ariops is the first one that comes to mind.
You get that, like, you get a view of them from the front, and they look so goofy.
Yeah.
They look real silly from the front.
They really do. So the Amphiterra Project was, what I did is I took one creature that did exist in our world and timeline. So that was the creature Triadabatrachus masonati, which is usually acknowledged as the first true frog like ancestor. Practically speaking, it just kind of looks like a long frog, like a sausage dog frog.
Hot dog style.
I learned during the process of this that the ability of frogs to hop came long before their ability to land.
Oh no!
Yeah, so there's fossil tracks of just like the skids, because the hopping evolved as like a I need to get out of here right away type of survival mechanic. Being able to land accurately or well or safely was a secondary concern. So it came much later.
Less important. High priority is up. Low priority is down.
Millions of years of frogs just like launching them and then physics ragdolling across the swamp.
Hilarious. Extremely good. Very funny to me. And also very much something I would do. Very much something like... if I was like pulling the levers and stuff on evolution, I'd be like, I've got a great new idea, fantastic new adaptation. I'm going to make these things launchable. These things are getting some air. And then I would immediately be like, push that to prod. Like, I want all of them doing it. And then immediately be like, oh, I did forget something important.
What's this part on the planet that says landing TBD?
Oh no, that's going to be in a future patch.
So yeah, in Amphiterra, in the world where it became very damp and moist at that time, it was a great setup for frogs to not just develop, but to develop further and bigger and more varied than we have in our world. And because everything is sort of a butterfly effect, some of the first things that develop is essentially a very big frog, but still something we would relatively recognize. Something like Beelzebufo being a very large frog in our own fossil record.
And also a fantastic name.
It's got to be one of the best in terms of extinct animals. I mean, it's the devil's toad, right? Beelzebub's toad. That's incredible.
Someone was having a fun day at work that day where they got to name that one. Someone was in a silly, goofy mood.
Creatures are hard to name, which is something I think we're going to discover throughout the course of this.
But whoever, they cooked on that one. Someone cooked here.
Absolutely. But yeah, then the Amphiterra Project is exploring the natural history of this alternate world over sort of a tree of life. So, you can see where things diverge and adapt into different niches and radiations. And a lot of the creatures were things that I would just want to explore because they're interesting things that happened in our world. Like, for example, I explore the niche of a large carnivore that adapts to a slow grazing, plant-eating lifestyle, like happened with the therizinosaurs in our timeline, which were like Tyrannosaurus relatives that found a place where it's like, you know what, I could just sit down and live like a panda. And then they did.
I was going to say panda. Like, this is giving panda to me.
Absolutely. I wanted to explore animals that became sessile and anchored themselves into one place to live their life. I wanted to explore animals that engage in mutual beneficial symbiosis, pack hunters. And I got to make all these creatures. I got to present this project, and I did get my master's.
Amazing. I know that whoever was like at this master's like presentation was having the time of their life.
It was actually an incredibly hard crowd.
Really?
Well, so the master's that I got was from DigiPen, which is a video game school. It's sort of the house that Nintendo built. And what I did was tangentially related to the world of entertainment. But it meant that I was presenting all this to mentors and a panel who maybe didn't understand anything about evolution, didn't necessarily understand that speculative evolution was a thing. I had to explain, no, these weren't actual real creatures in our timeline. So I had a long road to hoe. And on top of that, I had to present the whole thing end to end, as many creatures as I could, and my process and methods and everything in 20 minutes.
Impossible. Can't be done.
I did it with 10 seconds to spare. Somebody had a stopwatch and they all cheered.
Photo finish.
And then they leave the room and it's an incredibly sweaty, like 20 minutes while they deliberate. And then they come back and say that I passed them.
I'd be puking the whole time. I'd be just vomiting nonstop. Now, there's a few creatures in the Amphiterra Project that I really wanted to highlight because I think that people listening to this are going to really find these fascinating. The first one is the tropical frondle. I think this is one you mentioned, like this creature being sessile, like
yes.
is picks of one place and just sticks there and stays there like permanently. That looks like what's going on with this little guy. Could you talk to me about the tropical frondle a little bit?
Certainly. Something that happens in our world and timeline a lot is that we have creatures like, say, barnacles. A young barnacle, a barnacle larvae, does not look significantly different than the larvae of a crab or a shrimp, or similarly a flounder, though it's not sessile, looks, when it's young, it looks like a normal fish. And then something happens.
Something goes horribly wrong at some point.
Yeah, with barnacles, they find a place that they want to just be for the rest of their life, settle down. They give up their ability to have locomotion. They turn their legs into something for filter feeding. They just completely rearrange their body plan. Tropical frondle in particular is inspired by the sea squirt, which is a creature that is a free-swimming, active sort of larvae. But once it finds a spot that it wants to go down and live on, digests its own brain because it doesn't need it anymore. I'm
done thinking.
Exactly. What do I need this calorically intensive brain for when all I'm going to be doing is sticking my long prehensile tongue into the water column and trying to fish out particulate?
Got to get rid of brain. Got to make room for snacks.
Exactly. I can just be mostly digestive.
What I wouldn't give.
Mood?
I would trade everything. Also, as someone who has anxiety around, like, I can barely commit to putting a sticker on something because I'm like, what if this isn't the right spot? What if there's a better spot later? What if something goes horribly wrong? What if I lose this and now I've lost the sticker? I can't imagine having the strength of your convictions to be like, I found a good spot and I think I'm just gonna maybe delete my brain so that I can I never have the option of moving again.
The commitment.
I could never. Couldn't
but
be me.
So the way that the tropical frontal got there is that it had ancestors who went from being frogs to being sort of slow creeping frogs, living more like a chameleon or something like that, to something that maybe lives a little more like a Venus flytrap on the edges of the water, and then eventually moves into the water and becomes even less mobile. So, I mean, I think a trap that a lot of people in speculative evolution fall into is always bigger and more complicated and faster and stronger. You know, kind of thinking that evolution is a little like Pokemon evolution.
Yeah.
When it's about what works best, there are creatures that are incredibly simple in our world that evolved from more complicated, dynamic creatures.
I think the box jellies were
That's a
something
good
like
example.
that. I think the box jellies, we talked about that a few episodes ago, how like their ancestors had much more like neurological features than they do now. Like they just were like, we don't need this. Get rid of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent example.
Yes, sometimes evolution is like trimming the fat. Sometimes evolution is like, how little do we need to function?
Yeah, and I mean, evolution is full of things that atrophy with time. You know, whales' legs is a good example. You know, they're still in the process of that. Some whales still have hip bones and little floating leg bones in there that eventually will go away.
I did also want to look, because now I'm thinking about, you know, legs either atrophying or changing drastically. Another inhabitant of this world that I find delightful is the tree frixel.
Ah, yeah.
As soon as I saw it, I was like, that's my boy. I love whatever's happening here. Tell me about the tree frixel.
The tree frixel is, again, we're taking something that feels very realistic, very common, which is tree frogs. There's a number of tree frogs that they don't really jump per se. They're much more climbers. And I feel like it's then a pretty good jump to say that tree climbers can become brachiating creatures, such as the gibbons in our world. Brachiation being the ability to sort of swing from branch to branch. But even though they're achieving similar goals to a lemur, if they have a different body plan or setup to begin with, doesn't mean that they're going to follow things in the same way. So, for example, the tree frixel uses its back legs as its brachiating limbs, which to me feels like it makes sense. I mean, if you look at a frog and you're trying to decide which of these two sets of limbs are most developed, most dexterous, most muscular, most long-fingered, it's the back legs.
Yeah, like that's already what they're using to propel themselves. So it doesn't seem like a far, pardon the pun, but a far leap to imagine that rather than using them to push themselves off, it's just using, you know, to grip the next, which I guess is a form of jumping, sort of. I definitely, like, I see the through line.
Yeah, and you know what? I get some interesting comments on Amphiterra, and I would say the tree frixel's locomotion is the one that it shows up for the sort for most controversial, because there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, that makes sense, and there's a lot of people who are saying like, no, that's ridiculous.
Well, evolution is ridiculous sometimes.
Yeah. There is a flying reptile that I'm forgetting at the moment, but there's a flying creature that was sort of like, you know, when the Wright brothers were developing, I guess not specifically the Wright brothers, but when early airplanes, you know, you see the videos of the like, this is the one with a million wings, this is the one with the wings that turn, this is the, you know, all the attempts. There was one before the pterodactyls that was a similar body plan to the pterodactyls, but it was the back legs. Like they have big kite-like back legs and little front danglies.
I've heard of this.
I forget the name. We'll find it.
Hi there, it's me editing this episode. The creature Roxy was thinking of is called Charovipteryx. This gliding reptile is only known from one fossil, but boy, is it a spectacular fossil. It has got a complete skeleton and imprints of the hang glider-shaped membrane that spanned between its absurdly long hind legs. To knowledge, the only animal that ever had a body plan like it. It was about 25 centimeters long, which is just under 10 inches. The fossil was found in Kyrgyzstan and dates to around 225 million years ago. If you like funky, ancient, extinct animals, this one is a great one. All right, back to the episode.
It didn't necessarily take off, but it could have, and then we would have had a whole lineage and dynasty of back-legged flyers. Just because it didn't happen here doesn't mean it couldn't have.
And in the Amphiterra Project, your Frixels do become a line of these sort of back leg dominant bipedal creatures. I'm looking at the temperate freeple.
Yeah, the temperate freeple was the Amphiterra's sort of biggest foray into, I guess the correct term these days is sophonts.
Oh, I've never heard that word before. What does that mean?
I will say I don't know to what degree this is a scientific term versus something sci-fi people use as much, but my understanding of it is that it's the most modern and correct way to term what we used to tend to call sentient creatures or sapient creatures. The idea of like human-like intelligence, with the idea that much like us, we have extremely dexterous hands that have let us do all these incredible things. Our incredibly dexterous hands came from the tools we used to brachiate when we still lived in the trees. And our big brains, in part, came from having to do the very complex three-dimensional math that is swinging through trees. So my idea was that another creature who has to navigate this complex environment with dexterous limbs may also eventually lead to a human-like intelligence. When I get comments on the Amphiterra Project, a solid 70% of them are about the temperate freeple.
I could see this one being quite a hot button.
Yeah, and I mean, it's where it crosses more into the realm of like culture and anthropology and society. And the questions I get on them, a great example is I get a question saying, would the temperate freeple ever use makeup? And there's two interesting directions to go there. One is slightly practically thinking, okay, well, amphibians have very permeable skin. So maybe makeup wouldn't be a very good idea for them. What's on them could eventually end up inside them. But when you look at some of the decisions we've made, you have lead in makeup in Victorian England. You have tooth blackening in ancient Japan. You have, I think the ancient Egyptians would like melt fat down onto themselves. We did so many things with makeup that were and are still very bad for us, but it didn't stop us. So the reason I couldn't really necessarily answer a question like that was, well, they probably did sometime during their time on Earth. Anything is possible over the largeness of time, and you can't account for sentient or sophont creatures making bad decisions. War is a bad idea, but we still do it.
Yeah, like not everything is going to be a great idea. There's going to be some things that, maybe there's things about their world that they don't understand correctly. Like there's going to be things that, and evolution doesn't always come up with the best possible answer. It'll give you an answer, but it's not always going to be the best one.
Yeah. Though I have had the thought that frogs don't have facial muscles.
Oh.
So my thought is that if you are a temperate freeple getting ready for your day, what's that TikTok format? Like get ready with me.
Oh, yeah.
Freeple edition. I think if you were applying some sort of makeup or pigment or pattern or decoration to yourself, you do use your throat. The classic like frog throat balloon thing, the gular sac. I think that would be the center of attention. So in the same way that our clothes and makeup all kind of point towards our faces, which is what we use to communicate and express ourselves with, it could be that they would, it would be patterns and colors that point towards that sac, because that's your point of communication.
Something I don't think that we've explained that would, for people who are listening and aren't necessarily looking at the images that I'm looking at right now of your, by the way, stunning illustrations.
Oh,
the illustrations are beautiful. Is that these bipedal amphibians, both the Frixel and the freeple, are bipedal, but not the peds you think, not the ones you expect. So they're what we would think of as their arms, their forelimbs are the ones that are down on the ground supporting their body. And then the hind legs are doing this sort of yoga pose where they're reaching up to where like our analogous to our shoulders would be, and they're using their hind legs as we use our arms, which is a little bit startling at first because you're like, what am I looking at here? What is this creature? But I think it's such a cool, the idea to me of like convergent evolution, but taking wildly different routes to get there, like ending up with similar like humanoid body plans, but with an absolutely bonkers like pathway to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about the difference between a seal and a shark. They are both roughly the same shape. They have a propulsion system in the back, as you were. They're bullet shaped. They're both trying to catch fish. But a seal's back legs, when it's swimming, kind of form into a shape a lot like a shark's tail fin. They're doing similar things, but because they had different things to start with, they ended up at different places. Evolution is kind of lazy. It really hates making new structures, and it really likes reusing what it already has. So even things as basic as, say, our ears were gill plates. It already had gill plates. So, it got repurposed. It didn't invent an entirely new structure for the purposes of hearing. It repurposed what we already had.
When you're coming up with concepts or designs, ideas that you're going to incorporate into these different creatures, where do you start? Like, do you start with like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if a frog did this, and then like work backwards from there? Or do you think like, okay, like here's an environment, how might an amphibian body plan like adapt to this environment? Like what direction do you go to? What does that process look like for you?
I would say there's sort of two elements to it. One is, yes, sort of a wouldn't it be cool? Would be interesting. If we look at, say, the Freeple, that was me thinking, I would love to do a human intelligence equivalent. And then that turns into like, okay, well, what tends to cause things like that? With us, it was the activities we did when we lived up in the trees. And then I look at a creature that we already had in the Amphiterra timeline and think, how would it get from there to here? And there it's kind of, I actually my undergrad degree was in animation, film and TV animation. And there are two ways to animate when you're animating by drawing. You either do what's called straight ahead animation, where you do drawing number 1, drawing number 2, drawing number 3, and so on and so forth. Or what's called in between animation, where you do drawing number 1, you do drawing number 5, and then you do 3, and then you bridge the gap between 1 and 3, the gap between 3 and 5. So there were creatures that were made as sort of intermediary steps, but that then could branch off into their own thing. So, for example, the Freeple and the Frondel do share a common ancestor, some of which adapted into the trees, some of which adapted into these ambush predators, but they started from the same place.
I think that's a really cool way to approach, like you mentioned earlier, say you have like a fantasy world, you have a science fiction world, right? Like you're making a work of fiction, you really want to flesh out this world with wildlife and with flora and fauna. I think that's a cool way to like almost do like self-generating ideas, right? Because like you could start with like a couple of ideas, and then by looking at, okay, where could they have had a common ancestor? What could their common ancestor have looked like? And then once you have that common ancestor, you'd be like, well, what if this common ancestor was, went into a different environment? So like, it's a cool almost way that you can flesh out ideas while also setting yourself up for other ideas later.
Yeah, it's very much meant to be modular. A good example of this is, so I did all of Amphiterra in about 1 year.
Wow.
My master's program was 2 years. The first one was kind of getting ready for it, and then the second one was actually doing it, which means that I didn't get to do everything I wanted to. Originally speaking, I wanted to do not just the frog lineage, but also the other thing that evolved from Triatobatrachus masonati, which are newts and salamanders. And I wanted to explore them, and I would have had them be much more aquatic. I wanted to explore things like a electricity generating creature.
Ooh.
Or I wanted to explore what one of these might look like if it adapted to like the depths of the abyss. I wanted to explore like a whale-like filter feeder.
Ooh.
And the important thing is that the way I did Amphiterra, that door is still open.
Right.
I'd love to, more than anything else, really get to do an Amphiterra 2.0. It's hard to find the time outside of a school environment to give it the time that I'd like to. But that is coming. I will make that happen. And I'm hoping that this cut content will be part of that in addition to more. To be perfectly honest with you, and this is, I think, something important to establish, is I'm not a scientist. So there are holes in Amphiterra. If you go to the TV tropes page for Amphiterra, someone there, I want to believe with just the best of intentions, has made a extremely complete list of everything wrong with Amphiterra. Dates I got wrong. I drew the Triadabatrachus with one too many fingers. Pieces of like paleometeorology I didn't know about. Obviously, whoever wrote it knows a lot more about this than I do, and I think that it's not.
And is using their powers for evil.
I will say it's not written nicely. It's written. I'm going to be nice and say bluntly.
Not a dedicated hater.
But it's flattering in a way because clearly they read every word of the Amphiterra Project end to end to do this. The things that they're writing means that they know it better than I do.
Fan behavior. That's fan behavior.
Yeah. So I'll thank them in a dedication if I ever get to do Amphiterra 2.0.
Or maybe that's a consultant.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a collab.
Thanks, pal.
Oh, man. But that, there is also, I guess, a feeling of like suffering from success. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to get to a point where you've got a hater at that magnitude.
Yeah. So there is a YouTube series called Curious Archive where they tend to dissect sci-fi projects in general, a lot of Spec Evo stuff. They did one on Amphiterra. Before that, Amphiterra did not get many eyeballs on it at all. I found, a couple people discussing it in certain forums, and that was about it. And then the Curious Archive video comes out in, I think, 2022, and Amphiterra explodes virtually overnight. I wake up to just so many comments and messages, and it's weird to think now, but, it's been long enough that I get messages like, oh, I grew up with the Amphiterra Project. And it's like, this came out in 2017.
Like, how old are you?
Yeah, but no, that's entirely, I get fan art from like 11-year-old kids. I was contacted recently by someone who was like a kid in like a really fancy British prep school who wanted me to talk to their class.
I'd do it. I'd go.
I wanted to. It got canceled last minute. I don't know why.
Aww.
But I think that's great. I recently found that a British producer made like a EDM house track based on Amphiterra that kind of like remixes stuff from the site and from Curious Archive.
That rips. That's so cool.
It's there on Spotify if you look up Amphiterra.
It's like it has its own ecosystem. There's an ecosystem of content around it.
Yeah, which is incredibly heartening for me and makes me want to do more in this world. People are very excited for it.
Because now you got people playing in your space.
Yeah, I've had people reach out about making D&D modules and like statting out the creatures as monsters.
I like that.
Someone just defended their own thesis on I think science writing. So they wrote about Amphiterra, and the way in which they wrote about Amphiterra was their thesis.
That's really cool that your creative project and that your world from your imagination has like developed a life outside of you. It is now flowering and blooming like outside of just your efforts.
It's meant that I've gotten to talk to and even work with people that I've idolized for years.
I can relate to that experience 1,000,000%.
It's incredible. I got invited to do a project called Almost Real by a couple known as Jay and Hi Markidian. It's like a zine kind of thing with different themes. So I did What If Squids Could Fly, and I did What If You Could Bioengineer a Lab Out of a Crab. And those were incredible pieces to work with because of the attention Amphiterra got. The moment that it was so important to me. There's this Russian site, I think it translates to Blue Chimera, that when I was, 12 in my school's computer lab was a good directory for Spec Evo stuff, for older Spec Evo stuff, the Dougal Dixon stuff, Wayne Barlow, the Rhino Gradancia stuff. One day I learned that that Amphiterra was on there. On this 1988 GeoCities looking page, it was listed there.
Mom, I've made it.
It means the world to me. I have the screenshot saved, and that was just absolutely incredible.
How validating too.
I'm just so thankful for it, and it does feel great.
Hi friends, we are going to take a quick break to hear from our friends on the Maximum Fun Network. When we get back, we are flexing our creative muscles and making our very own creatures. So stay with us.
Are you a 5-star baddie? If you answered yes, then Black People Love Paramore is the podcast for you. Contrary to the title, we are not a podcast about the band Paramore. Black People Love Paramore is a pop culture show about the common and uncommon interests of Black people in order to help us feel a little bit more seen. We are your co-hosts, Sequoia Holmes,
Jewel Wicker,
and Ryan Graham.
And in each episode, we dissect one pop culture topic that mainstream media doesn't associate with the Black people, but we know that we like.
We get into topics like ginger ale, the Golden Girls, Black romance, Uno, and so much more.
Tune in every other Thursday to the podcast that's dedicated to helping Black people feel more seen. Find Black People Love Paramore on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
One thing we all have in common, we all have a mind.
It makes me so scared because I'm like, when is the bad thing going to happen?
And minds can be kind of unpredictable and eccentric.
Everybody wants to hear that they're not alone. Everybody wants to hear that someone else has those same thoughts.
Depression Mode with John Moe is about how interesting minds intersect with the lives and work of the people who have them. Comedians, authors, experts, all sorts of folks trying to make sense of their world.
It's not admitting something bad if you say, this is scary.
Depression Mode with John Moe, every Monday at MaximumFun.org or wherever you get podcasts.
In the same vein as like, you know, people kind of taking your creations and your concepts and like running with them and making their own, giving them life outside of just you. You had a really, really cool idea of something we could do for fun, of making a guy, making a creature, walking me through the process, or at least, you know, you have a really fun process thought out of how we can make a creature, make a speculative evolution creature. Could you tell people who are listening about the fun activity that we are going to do?
Okay, so the way that I have this set up is I have 2 lists with 10 items each. List 1 is a list of animals. List 2 is a list of what-if situations in terms of evolution. Should I read out the lists?
I think so, because I think that maybe outside of just us, people who are listening to this might find this fun to do on their own.
Oh, certainly. I mean, we should make the spreadsheet available. I'd love to see what other people would come up with.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so here's first the list of 10 animals. I tried to just choose ones that I felt I knew enough about to be able to talk about this. Okay, so the animals are brown bear, Bengal tiger, wiener dog, Maasai giraffe, scarlet macaw, orca, American alligator, giant Pacific octopus, Holstein cow, and common raven.
Excellent selection. I love the variety. I love the diversity. And then our next column is the what ifs.
Right. So the what ifs are, what if this animal adapted for Arctic conditions, adapted into a fossorial hunter, which means like a mole or something that digs around underground, adapted for amphibiousness, adapted into a troglodyte, which means an animal that lives in a cave, adapted the capability of flight, adapted into a filter feeder, adapted a sessile lifestyle, which means a creature like a barnacle that stays in one place. What if it returned to the ocean? What if it were domesticated by humans? And what if it were to live in eusocial colonies like ants or naked mole rats? Now, that being said, some of these options we'll probably have to re-roll because...
if it's redundant.
Yeah, the what if humans domesticated cows, I bet I can tell you pretty authoritatively that we know what would happen.
What if orcas returned to the ocean?
That's true. Though, there is something we said, though, there of like, well, then we'd have to figure out what if they left the ocean and then went back in. Which sounds weird until you realize that's kind of what whales have already done once.
Like, how much parkour are they willing to do? How many times can we go back and forth?
Talking about commitment.
So these are 10 options. I have in front of me a D10, and by the way, it is rainbow.
Oh, it's beautiful.
A nice little rainbow D10. Happy Pride. Oh, we're recording this during Pride Month. I don't know if it'll go up during Pride Month. If it does, it'll be the tail end of it. But it is a nice festive rainbow dice.
If it's outside of Pride Month, then that's just Pride Month too. We're just claiming that one as well.
Pride continued. Would you like me to roll?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's your show.
Sweet. Okay, let's go. How about I'll roll one and you can roll the next one?
Okay, yeah, I've got dice here too.
Okay, I will roll for the animal. Oh, it's gone. It left.
Oh no, it's no animal.
It landed on 8.
Landed on 8. So that is giant Pacific octopus.
Beautiful. I can already tell this is going to be really fun.
I didn't even do it on purpose that number 8 would be the octopus.
Look at that. All right, Roxy, give me the second roll. Okay,
second roll is 3. So adapted for amphibiousness.
Now, this is interesting.
So it's interesting. This is sort of going the opposite direction of what I originally expected.
Because this is already in the water. We're thinking,
true.
What if this animal develops the ability to spend significant amounts of time outside of the water and like spend parts of its lifestyle outside of the water? And I don't think there's any octopuses that spend significant amounts of time outside of water. I know octopuses are commonly in tide pools. You will see a lot of them in tide pools. I don't think they can spend too long outside of the water, but the tide pool environment would offer an opportunity for a transition into a more terrestrial lifestyle, because we've seen this in epaulet sharks. Are you familiar with epaulet sharks?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point, and it's a great example of the sort of evolutionary pressure that would drive this. Now, I will say that in The Future is Wild, the original one, they do explore this somewhat. They have a octopus that first adapts for fresh water, then adapts for mangrove swamps, and you get a thing called a swampus. And eventually, in the final version of Future's Wild, in the 200 million years hence, there are like elephant-sized land octopuses. So I'd be curious to, first off, go in a different direction.
Right.
So I do think the tide pool thing is really interesting.
I think we can go straight onto land from marine. Like, I don't think we have to do the freshwater detour. I think we can get straight there.
We know that something like this can happen because of, say, coconut crabs. Coconut crabs are marine creatures that now are most of the time on land. There are even land-only crabs. So that's an example of taking your gills and making them something that holds on to water for a very, very long time. Octopuses have a big sac. They are a big sac, so they could hold water for a long time.
They can. I'm thinking, and now hear me out. I think with the octopus, we can really lean into, I don't know if the giant Pacific octopus is specifically known for this, but octopuses are well known for their use of tools. Yes. They have intelligence. They have dexterity. They have things around them. I think they can develop something akin to, I'm imagining a diving bell spider, which creates a web around it that it can trap air underwater. So the diving bell spider is able to make a structure underwater that allows it to store air so that it can go down underwater and spend significant amounts of time underwater. I think the octopus could do something in the opposite direction, where I think it could do kind of like in SpongeBob. When SpongeBob and Patrick want to go into Sandy's dome, they have to put bowls on their head with water in them. I think this is something. I think there's something here.
I think, so here's what comes to mind for me. Octopuses already secrete mucus. They're already covered in their own slimy goo that helps them regulate their skin and keep them clean and healthy for all kinds of things. I would say that based on what you're saying here, we sort of combine it with the ability of a bagworm, where you have these caterpillars that build structures out of what's laying around them and will hold it together with their silk. I think it's a small jump to say, what if octopuses had thicker, stickier goo? That's a very small change. You could even say it's like, oh, well, as you get a species of octopus that is more and more adapted to getting stuck in these tide pools, they need to figure out a way to protect their bodies. Thicker, stickier, more impermeable goo would help them. What if then, with their octopus intelligence, they start sticking debris or seaweed or something together into I'm imagining something kind of like a hamster ball, but we also have the example of something like a vampire squid that can kind of make itself kind of an upside down umbrella full of water. Because to me, making like a cup seems easier than making a water balloon.
Right.
It could be something where it even adapts to lay its eggs into its own balloon that it carries around and raises its young in the safe water-filled enclosure that it's created. Maybe this is an octopus that gets so good at being in tide pools, it intentionally goes to tide pools to raise its young because big predators aren't going to be there. And it can make it more of a den thing. There's in the news, at least a couple of years ago, people found a whole like village octopuses had built out of like coconut shells and things. This could lead to colonial octopuses building a nest or some kind of burrowing situation to make them live this partially in, partially out of water life. I'm thinking sort of along the water's edge.
I feel like if they were like establishing these sort of like pockets, like basically like pockets along the shorelines, you could see them getting progressively farther and farther in, like farther inland as they're trying to maybe like get away from other octopuses. Maybe they're trying to like get away from predators in the water, or maybe trying to get away from like shorebirds that might be running along like the beaches and things like that, that might be prone to like eating the octopuses, you know, young out of the tide pools. So you could see that sort of like shift inland as they might be trying to get like away from some of the threats of the beach. Especially I'm most familiar with, you know, the shores of the Pacific Northwest. So if they were on like a particularly like rocky shoreline or something, it wouldn't be a far leap to get into a forest. There's probably a forest nearby. It's the Pacific Northwest. It's probably
and it's very damp.
There's like a running joke of like the Pacific tree octopus.
That's true. Oh my God. Is that kind of what we went towards? Is that the creature we created?
The Pacific tree octopus.
It could live kind of like the poison dart frogs that live in the bromeliads.
Like in the Pacific Northwest forests, we don't get a lot of those because I think those are, you know, working in pools that have formed in leaves, right, from bromeliads. And I don't know of like Pacific Northwest species that would have leaf structures that would allow that. But what we do have is moss. We have so much moss.
That is true.
So maybe the moss could be a good source of moisture for them. Although that would be like rainwater, so that wouldn't be like salty. If they would rely on salt water, moss might not be great. But if they're already sort of like you mentioned, like slapping kelp on their body, if they're already carrying like kelp or something around with them, that could be something that they're like bringing with them.
That makes me think of two very interesting things. First off, in any scenario, it's not just the octopus that's evolving. So it could be taking advantage of plant life that doesn't exist in our timeline. You know, there could be, you know, maybe there does develop a moss that has sort of a cup-like or bucket-like structure for its own purposes that then the octopus can take advantage of, maybe even cultivate, maybe even farm or encourage. You know, if it uses this, you know, we have ants that farm fungus. Maybe we have octopuses that intentionally cultivate, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, the kind of giant leaf that Totoro carries around. You know, maybe they encourage that, and then it's beneficial for the plant, and the plant gets encouraged to be bigger and more bucket-like and more water-like. And eventually the plant might even be domesticated in such a way that it can't live and grow without the help of our friendly Pacific tree octopuses.
There would probably be some physiological adaptation, right? You've got the thicker mucus, but maybe also the ability to retain moisture more. They would also, I think, need more firm muscular structure, I guess, because when you see an octopus outside of water, they're quite just sort of floppy.
Yeah, gravity would be a enormous enemy for them here.
Yeah, they're fighting an uphill battle.
Yeah. When you think, I mean, octopuses are mollusks. There are reasons that we don't have very gigantic snails and slugs going around because that type of body structure only supports a certain amount of size. But we can theorize about that. For example, you're right, they could become more muscular. They could also become, what's that word? Like cars have it, hydraulics. They could use a hydraulic system to have more structure. You know, they could have something that they fill with water to create a certain amount of rigidity. Or they become incredibly muscular. I love that idea, just like walking around on
ripped
on
octopus.
I really like that, especially because they have the eyes on the very top of their head.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're looking out at this beautiful Pacific Northwest lake and you just see the two little eyes come up in the middle. It's like, oh, look, it's an octopus. And it just comes up out of the water, incredibly buff. Holding
it looks like Machamp.
Exactly. It's been carrying its seaweed. It's like, hey, sup?
Now, a seaweed cape is a great visual.
Yeah.
Like, imagining that they are, like, cloaking themselves. Maybe that's how they're, like, carrying water around.
Kind of like a ghillie suit.
Also, they could be, like, using things that they're attaching to their body to give their body more structure.
Yeah, that makes sense. A hermit crab outside of its shell is a very soft and squishy and weak creature. So, that'd be cool too. And then things could evolve from there.
We're approaching mech. We're approaching an octopus mech.
Octopuses are so incredibly intelligent, and they're building something here in a very far future. Do they develop a sense of art?
I would love to see octopus art.
Is there fashion? We see things. Orcas develop fashion trends.
It would be so easy for them, effortless, right? They can just change like the color and the texture of their body. They could be pioneers.
There's coconut octopuses in our world that use their suckers to hold two halves of a coconut onto itself as mech armor.
They already have mechs. Okay, they beat us to it. They were so early.
Octopus was a fun one to go to because they're already so weird and so smart. I think really the only thing holding octopuses back from doing that now is their short lifespan.
That's true. They've only got like a year tops.
Yeah.
Although that's a speed run. That's a life speed run. We're so rapidly approaching the giant steampunk spider at the end of Wild Wild West.
Oh my God, yeah.
Dangerously close.
And this is how you get Amphiterra, because then I also want to think like these things wouldn't stay in the Pacific Northwest. They'd move farther east from there, where it's those vast barrens. What would that look like for them? What would they build their new mechs out of? How would they adapt? How would they speciate and vary from our Pacific tree octopus? What does the Montana plains octopus look like?
That's going to be rough for them because like they would have to be living off of like rainwater, I guess. Well, Montana has a lot of alpine lakes, right? So like I feel like they would be getting some runoff, like maybe some like meltwater from up in the mountains.
Yeah, I think it could be a pygmy situation where because they would essentially have islands, these isolated lakes. It becomes more advantageous for them to get smaller. So maybe, suddenly we're looking at a world where we have these 6-inch octopus mechs crawling around a mountain from their mountain strongholds.
We did spiders again. Reverse engineered spiders. Could we do one more? Can we do one more creature?
I would absolutely
I know we're running
love
a little long, but this was really fun and I want to do one more.
We absolutely could.
How about this time you roll for the animal and I'll roll for the adaptation?
Okay, works for me.
Okay, let's see what creature we get.
I got... What's number 5? I got Scarlet Macaw.
Oh, it's bird hours. This is going to be fun. Okay,
let's see. And a wild one, too.
A very fun and goofy bird. Let's see what I get. 1. Adapted for Arctic conditions.
I think that's interesting.
Okay, an Arctic parrot. I'm trying to think. Are there already any Arctic parrots? There's alpine parrots with the Kia from New Zealand.
There's like kakapo down there.
So what are the conditions in the Arctic that would impact a tropical bird?
Well, we don't just have to do bird ends up in the Arctic. The Arctic can come to it.
Oh, that's true.
So it could be that our what if question is, what if an ice age?
Right. A massive, devastating ice age that has reached Central America.
That's true. Maybe a better example would be something that I think is entirely possible is, this is a post-human situation. A feasible flock of scarlet macaws gets out of a zoo in, say, New Zealand.
And makes their way south.
Yeah, and becomes feral. Which happens enough. You look at, say, Florida, which has so many invasive species. It could be something like that. But a scarlet macaw, is an interesting animal because it can do things like dig. It's astonishing how they can just chew their way into a cliffside with their beak. They have a very wide range of things that they can eat, which is good for adaptation. They have incredibly dexterous prehensile hands. I mean, feet, hands, whatever, but the amount of movement that they have is incredible.
There's a feature that macaws have that I think would serve them very well in an Arctic climate, and that is the tough beak that they can crack things like nuts and seeds. And I think that would serve them well because that would allow them to take advantage of food that is less available in the winter. Like during the time when there's not a lot of fruit, right? Like there's maybe not a lot of like fruit that's available. They're going to have to be relying on seeds and nuts and things that, you know, aren't necessarily like in season during the winter.
Yeah.
So I think they could really take advantage of that. And when I'm thinking of like Arctic fruit, because I know they do eat a lot of fruit. So Arctic fruits would have to be things like berries. Maybe they could get a little more carnivorous.
I mean, a macaw is one of the only animals I can think of that could successfully crack open and eat a pine cone with any level of ease. But yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, they come from animals that were carnivorous. So, I mean, that's a short hop back. Something I have noticed about evolution is that it doesn't tend to re-evolve things very easily. So, even though the scarlet macaw's ancestors had teeth, and it ostensibly still has the code for teeth somewhere in its database, to me, it seems much more likely that that beak would develop further into like kind of like a killing edge.
Like get sharper.
Here's also something to consider. Is this adapting for Antarctic conditions or Arctic conditions? Because we have, say, a tundra parrot versus a parrot that I could see becoming like penguin-like.
Right.
I could definitely see it eating mussels and oysters and clams with that beak. That would be an easy jump for it.
I think going off of like what you mentioned, like maybe say that there's like feral parrots that escape captivity and make their way. I could see that happening most easily going from like New Zealand to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Or like Australia to Antarctica or something like that. So I would say Antarctic makes sense to me. And in the Antarctic, there are not any large terrestrial predators.
True.
So you don't have bears. There are large predators, but they're in the water and you really don't have to worry about them. So I'm seeing flightlessness. Like we don't have to fly anymore. Maybe they become flightless and develop a little bit more of a ground parrot, like the kakapo or like something like that maybe they're a little bit more, maybe they have longer legs. Maybe they're more stocky.
We're establishing that there's no large predators there. Let's say this is a post-human example. That means there are already penguins there. What if we've created a penguin predator?
Oh no. And penguins famously do like fearless. They're not ready for a ground predator.
Yeah, so this could be devastating for them, and it would be interesting how penguins would develop. But I'm thinking a parrot evolving into something that lives life a lot like a leopard seal.
Okay, so macaws have that sort of, it's not a bald face, right?
But it's up there.
It's wrinkly, it's a little bit more bare skin. What if the macaw has become a scavenger? And the macaw is leaning more vulture and is maybe like lurking around penguin colonies. It's now terrestrial. They don't have to fly anymore, but they are maybe like trotting around penguin colonies and keeping an eye out for like dead penguins. And maybe when a penguin is dead or something like that, the macaw, the now terrestrial and scavenging macaw, is able to like infiltrate the penguin colony. The penguins are not afraid of this thing because they don't recognize a terrestrial predator, and it's able to come in and like eat the already dead penguins.
Oh my gosh. So two things come to mind. One is there's a difference between a scavenger and an opportunist. Mm-hmm. So this could be also something that goes after, say, an unguarded chick. But the other thing that occurs to me is, so we are developing a large penguin-eating parrot. Maybe it's the kind of predator, I forget the specific word for this, but like how there's spiders that disguise themselves as ants to infiltrate the colony. Oh. This is a penguin mimic. And what are parrots really good at doing with their voices? Oh. And how do penguins communicate?
Very good.
Oh my God, because penguins do the whole thing where it's like, I'm going to make the sound of my mom so my mom can find me specifically. You have a predator scavenger opportunist that can waddle its way into a crowd of emperor penguins, learn the specific sound pattern that mom uses for the baby, and then use it. And something people don't know, scarlet macaws are already incredible swimmers.
Ooh.
They're already there.
I've never seen them do that.
Yeah, it's like a big breaststroke. They do like a big Michael Phelps breaststroke. So this is something that maybe it couldn't even escape into the water to get away from.
Right, because they're like, I'm still coming for you. Although I think they wouldn't want to spend too much time in the water because there would be large seals. Like
that is
large seals and like orcas and whales and stuff that would be in the water, like toothed whales.
Yeah.
That
I think seals would be strong competition for our creature, which I kind of want to call like the Reaper macaw or something.
I love that.
Because I'm just imagining this like this is the art part, right? I'm imagining something kind of skulking and devious looking. The skulker.
Because they're already bright red, which is going to be challenging for like blending in.
Color changes are something that happen very fast, evolutionarily speaking. You look at, say, pepper moths in our timeline that within a generation or two can completely change their color. So my assumption is that anything that's adapting for an Arctic setting would very quickly select for like whites and blacks and grays.
They already have a good bit of white and black on their face. Although if they are scavengers and if they're spending a lot of time in carnage, maybe they can keep the red.
I would do they sort of reacquire the red for, say, mating season or to communicate with others. It's like, oh, it's mating season in the Arctic when the Reaper macaws start growing their 7-foot tall red plumes.
Yeah, I think I just want the red to stay.
That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine.
The red is important to me.
One of the most common comments that I get on Amphiterra is that too many of them remain too frog-like. And the simple fact there is, I like frogs. I like their funny little faces.
This one's for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Ellen can have scarlet macaws as a treat.
As a treat, as a little treat sometimes, I can keep the red, even though it does not help with their But also, what would they be camouflaging from? Right? Like,
that's a good point.
Penguins wouldn't be scared of them, so they don't necessarily have to sneak up on them. They don't have any other large terrestrial predators, so I don't think they really need to camouflage.
Maybe it would be kind of like elephant seals, where most of the pack looks one way, but then you have a leader that looks a very different way. Maybe it's something like, the lioness equivalent goes into the pack of penguins, grabs food, brings it back to like, I'm just imagining this like crime boss looking elephant seal proportioned, wicked looking blubber parrot.
Oh yeah, I guess warmth is going to be a thing that you'd have to think about. They'd have to get really fluffy.
Really fluffy or no fluff and fat.
I do like really fluffy though, because I feel like we're working towards something like an Arctic velociraptor, which is great for
Penguins
me.
are kind of both. Penguins are both blubbery and have a fluffy exterior that traps a lot of air. I did an Arctic fragging for Amphiterra, and instead of having it develop hair, I had it develop hair like tubes of skin and fat and blood. So it's convergent. It's getting to what hair does without ever actually developing hair, because why would it?
Yeah, I don't know which direction the Reaper macaw would go in, but I think just like a fluffy, bright red velociraptor is a delightful image to me.
I really like that. And God, just the silhouette, because parrots have just like, they already have kind of this hunched, sinister pose. So it's such good character design. If I were to draw it, I would really emphasize like the wicked beak. I would really emphasize powerful shoulders. Yeah, it would have strong, powerful legs to get around with, and then can plunge into the water after a fleeing penguin.
Oh man, I wasn't sure where we were going to get, but I'm very happy with where we ended up.
Me too.
The Reaper macaw.
Me too. I really like that idea.
This is a banger. I am eager to see anyone's fan art. If anyone wants to cook up some fan art of our Reaper macaw or of our mech piloting tree octopus. What are you working on next? Like, what do you have coming up that people can look out for?
So I do want to continue Amphiterra. That's a little reliant on Patreon support, just because it's hard to find the time to do so otherwise. I work full-time as a freelance illustrator, character designer, so I wear a lot of hats at all times. I'm working with a team that I can't say too much about on an animated series. I'm working with a team on a dark ride, like for a theme park.
Wow. That's going to be awesome.
I'm always doing a lot of like, I do commissions. I do like individual commissions all the time, pet portraits, wedding gifts, that kind of thing. I have a kids book that I've been working on forever that I would also like to finish in the near future. It should be said that, to keep track of me anywhere, I'm Big Huge Frog everywhere on all the platforms. So you can always find me that way.
Such an indicative handle.
I just sort of fell into it. I'm going to be selling prints at the Minnesota Garlic Festival.
What?
Yeah, so without getting into the detail too much, it's, as you can imagine, a very hard time to be making your living drawing digitally. Without being too much of a bummer, I would say that I get about 25% of the business that I did before the big AI art boom. And that sucks and that's sad. But you know what? Life finds a way. It does mean that the clients that I have now tend to be pretty anti-AI, which is good. They're hiring me because I'm doing things by hand. And B, it means that I'm actually starting to pivot into a lot more in-person stuff. Like I've been selling prints and t-shirts and whatnot digitally through like Redbubble for 15 years or something like that. And now I'm, approaching art festivals and selling more in person and connecting more with the community. Especially here in Minneapolis, the art community has been just unbelievably vibrant and warm and welcoming. So that's been great. And the Minnesota Garlic Festival thing, literally all that happened was I saw their poster from last year, while being nice, thought I could do better. And I did what is increasingly the way to do this, boomer style. I cold called someone out of nowhere, said, hey, I'm a local artist. I'd love to do something with you guys. And they opened up the conversation. And now I have a print for them that is only for the Garlic Festival. It's sort of like a Where's Waldo with a bunch of little garlics enjoying a festival.
Oh.
I'm doing generally more garden-themed prints. And this is just the first event that I'm really trying this at. But I think it's going to go really well.
I think so. That sounds really fun.
They really welcomed me with open arms. I literally wrote, it's like, hey, I love garlic. I put it on everything. Can I do some art for you?
Who doesn't? That's awesome.
I'm Mexican and Italian, so it's on everything.
On the ice cream.
You wouldn't be wrong. I went to Maine once. They do a lobster ice cream with garlic butter, and it was pretty fantastic.
It's a hard sell for me. I'll think about it.
That's fair.
Roxy, you already mentioned that people can, follow you on social media, anything like that. Is there anything like, I don't know, what would you like to like leave people with? Do you have maybe like any recommendations, like favorite works of science fiction or anything like what action items? Where can people go next?
I would say I am incredibly lucky that people like Amphiterra. I don't feel like it's anywhere near the best of the Spec Evo community. So I'd love to just highlight a couple of those. One would be Dougal Dixon's books. So that's After Man, Man After Man, The New Dinosaurs, The Future is Wild, which I keep hearing they're going to do more with any day now. Well, it's one of those things where it's like any day now has been since like 2010.
It's the Elder Scrolls 7 or Elder Scrolls, what is it? Elder Scrolls 7?
Maybe more like Duke Nukem. There is Jay and Hi from Fortuna Media that I did Almost Real with. They produce a webcomic called Runaway to the Stars that is hard sci-fi. So like, for example, it's a crew made of creatures from different planets and they can't share food at all because they can't digest each other's proteins. And it's a webcomic, certainly, but there's all this corollary information of like, what does their toilet look like that they can all use at the same time? What's like the hydroponic situation? How does each one of these creatures' societies work? And Amphiterra, I started from frogs, which are here and studyable, but they did something where they started from scratch for so many of these creatures, and it's just incredible world building. Also in that vein is the work of Alex Ries, or Rise, I'm not 100% sure, Ries. He does a project called the Birrin Project, Birrin, where it is an alien world. And I had the benefit of bones still work like bones, photosynthesis is still photosynthesis, food is still food. Alex started from scratch. He figured out how bones work on another planet. He reinvented the concept of like ovipary and vivipary into something sort of between the two, into like a pregnancy that you can like take off and put on.
The dream, living the dream.
Honestly,
a utopia.
He figured out what space flight and politics would be like for these creatures. It's just an absolute end-to-end amazing project. Can't say enough good about that. I would say to check out Rhino Gradentia, which is the first one, the very first one. It's, I think, from the 1800s. And it was one of those things like the War of the Worlds hoax, where it was written as if this was a real island that someone had found. And it was an island where you know how there's the shrews that have the little wiggly nose? Kind of like an elephant trunk?
Oh, yes, love them.
Well, it was what if those evolved to take over a whole island into all the different niches and mostly got around on their nose?
Oh, like Darwin's finches, but with shrews.
Yeah, and so there's ones that are walking around on their nose like legs. There's ones that anchor themselves into position with their nose as a sessile thing. And the fact that this was so long ago is astonishing to me. And the very last one that I would talk about would be the Serena Project, which mine is most often compared to. But just Serena, that project's been going for like 10 years or something like that. It's much more writing than mine, than visual, though there is plenty of visual. And that is what's called a seed world project. So this is a situation where it's a future where humans are more technologically advanced. And we can do experiments like this that aren't necessarily ethical. We go to a completely barren world, terraform it with like the bare basics, give it things like algae and the crustaceans that you need to develop an atmosphere. The biggest vertebrate that they introduce is a canary, a yellow canary. I think they also put like minnows in the water. And then over the course of hundreds of thousands of millions of years, they evolve out. They evolve into sophont creatures multiple times, and there's rises and falls, and they do things like clades of these canaries that get like tentacular manipulative beaks. They do things like the fish in the water coming out of the water, but in a completely different way than what happened here, into sort of a tripod scenario. And it's just incredible. And the creator, whose name escapes me at the moment, is incredibly nice. Because we have
that helps.
we've crossed each other on the internet before, and I'm happy to say they're a lovely person who deserves all the flowers we can give them.
That sounds really, really fun. I enjoy works that get more into like the logistical sort of concerns of like, how are we solving these problems that come up naturally?
Yeah.
Can I drop two of my
course,
favorites?
certainly.
Number one, I've mentioned it quite a few times on this podcast before because it had been recommended to me like 5 different times by 5 different people before I finally read it. Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Have you read this book?
No, I'm not familiar.
Oh, you're going to love it. The less you know about it going in, the better.
Ooh.
So I will say it is pretty hard science fiction. Spiders is what I'll say.
Hey, I'm down. Oh, I think
Spiders.
I think I've tangentially seen what you're talking about, and I'm very yeah. I'll dive right in. I think that's great.
I got it from my local library. It was I got it on my Kindle. I used the Libby app, and I got a hold of this book, and I was able to read it. And it's a series. I think it's a trilogy. There's 3 of them, and I've only read the first one. I really want to read the next few ones. It's long. It's a little bit dense, but I was so into it. And I'm a slow reader. I have to reread the same page a few times because I will like daydream for half of it. I have to go back and reread it. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. There's even I was reading it at the same time as my mom. Like I got my mom to read it with me. And there's a part in it that was surprisingly incredibly emotional. That it was like an emotional, just like gut punch in the middle of it. And my mom and I were both like texting each other. We're like, why am I crying in this spider book right now?
God, I totally get that.
Really, really good book.
It's astonishing the things that can get you like that.
So Children of Time is one of my favorites. My other one, I don't even know if you could really call it speculative evolution because it doesn't really get into the evolutionary weeds, but I guess more just like science fiction.
Spec bio, you might say?
Yeah. Is Scavenger's Reign. Have you watched Scavenger's Reign?
I haven't. I've seen enough clips, but I haven't really dived in. I really want to. But that is an excellent point.
If you have that like thing in your brain where when you see something, you immediately want to know everything there is to know about it. And you're like, I have to learn more about this thing and how it works. This will be infuriating because a lot of things in the show aren't really explained, and they're just kind of presented, and you have to just kind of observe them and make your own interpretations of what you're seeing. But there are so many times in Scavenger's Reign, which is a single season animated series. I think it was originally on HBO, and then HBO canceled it, and then I watched it on Netflix. And it is just like a crew of space farers that have been marooned on an alien planet. And all of them are in different situations, and they have different circumstances and have different backstories and stuff. But it's all these people having to navigate and survive on this alien planet. And so you get this really like a tour of the different ecosystems on this planet, the different plant life, the different wildlife on this planet. A lot of them are very high concept, but a lot of them are very rooted in like real world. I was thinking, and I was like, this is like a water beetle, or like this is like this type of fungus or something like this. And I remember reading an interview, I think it was on Reddit, they were doing like an AMA or something, the people that like created and wrote Scavenger's Reign, and people were asking them like, did you have like, are you guys biologists? Like, are you guys like ecologists or something? Like, did you have biology consultants or something? And they were like, no, we made it up. And some of it just happened to also be real.
that works really well. That's a beautiful thing. I love stuff like that. When it comes to my like for fun reading, I'm a really big fan of sci-fi and fantasy from around like the late 70s, early 80s. You know, like I really love a cover that looks like it could be airbrushed onto the side of a van. And just, you know, to give if you liked Scavenger's Reign, consider this. The Rama trilogy, I believe is by Robert Heinlein, is, you know, humans are on a mysterious ship and there are aliens that are just so not the like Star Trek, these are people, but with different loaf on their heads. No, like it's how do you communicate with just an utterly alien existence that's completely different in its biology, its perception of time, its perception of light. And it's slow and it's methodical and it's not the world's easiest read, but it's so worth it. I love things that are in depth. I love really good sci-fi and I love really bad fantasy. I love fantasy that is just like, you just transcribed your D&D session.
You just wrote it down. I really like, first of all, the work of Becky Chambers. Like for like more like modern sci-fi stuff, the work of Becky Chambers involves a lot of like what accommodations would you need to make to have like a planet populated by, you know, species that developed in different. So there's one species that like never developed hearing. They don't communicate with sound. So like the different ways that this species, like when it was living with other species that do communicate with sound, like the types of technology they would need to like, you know, live together. And I really like the work of Becky Chambers goes into a lot of like, so she's the series that starts with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And then there's a sequel to that also has a long title, and I can't remember the title, but I also read the sequel to it. And I think there's one more I haven't read, but it's a lot of that. Like there's one species that like communicates with tentacles on their face. And so humans don't have tentacles on their face. So they have to use their hands to like approximate the gestures of the tentacles on their face.
I love that.
It's really, really fun.
I love stuff like that. In the Rama trilogy, these aliens that they have to communicate with, one of the difficulties is that the aliens are astonished by our ability to store water and nutrients. They need to be intaking it basically continuously, like breathing. And that causes all kinds of problems because like that's such a different way to live. And I love that idea. I love the differences between the cultures, the differences between biology, the way that culture reflects biology. I mean, imagine how different all of our everything would be different if just like we had one more finger. Yeah.
We'd have like a different base counting system.
Exactly. Yeah. Like how many symbols are just hands or different forms of hands, or the smallest change can have such awesome butterfly consequences. And I guess that really is Spec Bio and Spec Evo to a T.
Yeah. I hope that, you know, people have been inspired by your work and by the work of, you know, other great science fiction creators. And I hope people go out and seek out more content about speculative evolution and, you know, how biology can inspire science fiction and inspire our imaginations. I mentioned earlier that, you know, there are all the places where people can go to find more from you and more from your work. And I also have links in the episode description so that anyone listening can just click through. Roxy, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I've had an amazing time. It was a lot of fun. I hope that anyone listening has been inspired, maybe is feeling a little creatively motivated, maybe to explore some worlds in their own imagination. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I think that the absolute best case scenario that can come out of this is that other people feel inspired to create their own worlds. If any of this interests you, if you have any questions, if you just want to chat about this stuff, please hit me up on the various networks and socials. And I would love nothing more than to get to chat about this stuff with more wonderful people like Ellen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Roxy. It was so much fun. Can't wait till next time. We'll talk to you later.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you for indulging me in a little bit of sci-fi nerd behavior, as a treat. If you liked what you heard, I hope you leave behind some kind words for us in a review on your podcast app of choice. If you want to hang out with us online, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, Blue Sky. Links to everything will be in the episode description. Also, just as a reminder, Roxy made illustrations to accompany this episode, so please head over to our social media to see them. They are amazing. You can send me an email at ellen@justthezooofus.com if you have a cool animal you'd like to hear us talk about on the show. We would like to thank Maximum Fun for having us on their network alongside their other amazing shows like the ones that you heard promos for here today. You can go check those out and learn more about the network and how you can be a part of supporting our show over at MaximumFun.org. Finally, we would like to thank Louis Zong for our theme music. That's all for today. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
supported
directly
by you.